Righto folks, welcome back to the Williams Real Estate channel. Today we're discussing the federal Labor government's new net zero targets that have been currently being released in the media. What does it all mean? How will it impact the markets? So from top down, the federal government has released their new targets of 62 to 70% reduction in emissions below 2005 levels. So 20 years ago, they're trying to get below, and net zero by 2050. To do this, they're continually moving away from coal power plants, so shutting down coal power, moving into renewables. They're spending over $9 billion on renewable plans for further renewable projects, including EV chargers across the country, in order to reduce climate impact, right? So it's quite ironic because at the same time, we export out of Australia every year more than 7 times the amount of coal we consume as a country. So let that sink in for a second. So we're exporting more than 7 times coal for the likes of China, India to burn, but we don't burn it ourselves. It still goes into the atmosphere. So if they were actually serious about reducing emissions, why wouldn't they just trim back on how much we export by 20, 30%? And you'd already reduce the amount of emissions rather than putting the strain on the Australian people. Because as we continue to go down this path, numbers do not lie. So this argument will ultimately get settled by physics, as Australia as a growing population, we've got the strongest growing population in the world, more than 3% in population. That's demand. Further, as we continue to move into AI worlds, that's going to draw on higher levels of electricity, plus moving into more electric vehicles. That's going to put up more pressure on the grid. So currently now, coal-fired plants provide about 60% of energy to the grid, and they're looking to try and shut them down. They're not building anymore. They're not approving anymore. At some point, something has to give. So you're already seeing it with the energy bills going up, power bills going up, gas bills going up, as the demand for electricity will continue to grow by population growth, but also us transforming into this new world of AI. Data centers are being built left, right, and center. So the demand is growing and they're reducing the supply, which ultimately is going to push up prices. This is killing our manufacturing industry. The likes of Blue Scope Steel say it's 3 times cheaper to manufacture in the US than it is in Australia. So ultimately that pushes up prices of materials, which gets fed into the housing industry. And there's this big push from the government to solar panels and batteries. I want to know, where the hell do you put solar panels and batteries on an apartment, right? So it's only a small minority of people who, one, own a home and live in the home that have the option to put solar panels and batteries. For 80% of the population who either live in an apartment or who rent, don't have that luxury. So at what point do they think that we're going to just switch off coal and be self-sufficient on solar and batteries? It's a pipe dream. People can barely buy a home, let alone batteries and solar panels for their house. So renters too. So the tenant pays for the electricity. So what's the incentive for an investor to put solar panels or battery on a property one that only has a 20-year lifespan, so you have to replace it every 20 years. If you're lucky, you probably have to even replace it earlier. So that's a cost, that's a capital cost. It's only a very small minority of people that would actually do it. Further to that, we export coal 7x, more than 7 times to the likes of China, India, US. They then use that for power and for manufacturing. They use some of that coal to manufacture batteries and solar. They then export that to Australia. We buy that off them to use. So ultimately, you can't ever get away from coal because you have to use it for manufacturing. And if Australia doesn't want to use coal, if the federal government doesn't want to use coal in Australia, then we'll have no manufacturing industry because you can't manufacture anything off the back of solar and wind and hydro. It's not sufficient enough, let alone not even sufficient enough to power the grid, let alone manufacturing. Hence why prices keep going up for manufacturing. That's killing the industry. It's pushing up house prices. So house prices are being driven up by 3 factors of demand from growth, population growth. That's pushing up on rents, which gets capitalized into higher prices. That's pushing up demand, that's pushing up prices, but also the cost of new construction is being restricted because the cost of labor and materials. Labor is getting pushed up with the minimum wage. As they are pushing the minimum wage up, that gets capitalized into every wage, so that ultimately has to be fed down the chain to the end consumer. The unions, talking to people in the industry, with a union site, they're paying $110 for labourers. Out of that $110, $55 goes to the guy on the ground, the actual labourer, and the balance, 65, goes to the union. Out of that 65, they take a 20% clip. The rest goes to the federal government. So the federal government's pushing up labour price, not just for the bloke on the shovel. Mind you, that filters through all the trades rates and supervision and construction management rates. Goes through the whole construction industry. So that's pushing up labour price. Our labour prices are more than double than industry standard across the world, and that's the government pushing that up. So the government's heavy unionised, the union get a kickback, and then the government gets a kickback off those higher rates, which the private sector is paying, but the private sector hands on those costs to the end consumer. So that's what's pushing up labour prices, which is ultimately pushing up property prices, the new construction costs. 5 years ago, the build cost for a unit, 300 grand. These days it's 600 because of higher labour costs. They've more than doubled in recent years, and the higher energy costs, which pushes up the prices of manufacturing the likes of blue scope steel and the bricks, concrete. Everything that goes into new housing is more than double in the last 5-6 years, which has been driven by the federal government. So it's just a complete Ponzi scheme, really, that's been feeding this machine. So in order to protect yourself, in order to capitalize, because nothing's going to change. Until something breaks, nothing's going to change. Because I even saw Susan Lee flip-flopping, saying she was for net zero, she's not for net zero, so she doesn't know. Even the Liberals, they're pretty much the same party, more or less. They are pretty centre-left, and in order to really recalibrate the market to allow young people into the market, you need to flip the script. It's gone are the days that you can get an average wage and buy a house to live in like what the baby boomers did. That market's gone. That strategy is 30 years out of date. So if you're still trying to do that strategy, best of luck, but Don't rely on the government to come save you, because they're more or less the same. And I don't see anything changing. But what I see is us going continually down this path until something breaks. Something will break in the system. Ultimately, the end of the land cycle will start, but something in the system will ultimately give. It has to be something either in the energy department, where we're not generating enough energy to meet the demand, and there could be blackouts. Businesses will be getting wiped out as they won't be able to keep pushing up prices, so they'll lose demand, because ultimately they won't be able to keep pushing it down the cost to the end consumer, because if the end consumer doesn't consume their product or services, they lose demand, and if they can't meet their bills, then they go broke. So businesses will be going broke in time, driven by this high energy price in order to achieve this supposed net zero. So we're only crippling our own economy, the government is. Meanwhile, they're happy as Larry to export 7 times more coal to the likes of China to burn in the same atmosphere. Tailor that back, tape it back, burn more, reduce energy prices, get our manufacturing industry going, recalibrate the market. So anyway, this is turning into more of a rant than anything, but what I say is to protect yourself, buy established real estate. Don't go buy new stuff, new and off the plan stuff, brand new, because that's overvalued. If you're looking to get into the market and build your wealth to protect yourself from inflation, to set up your family, to create a legacy, you need to flip the script. Invest in property first and delay buying the family home until you've built a decent foundation portfolio of 10 plus properties in established stock. If you can go buy stuff for half the replacement value with strong yields, you'll never go wrong. But be careful now of which market you're getting into. It's not the booming markets you want to get into in 2025. As the markets are due to turn, I see all this crazy net zero policies just feeding on itself. Ultimately, it'll come to a grinding halt in the years ahead, and the federal government won't see through this climate cult until the lights start going out and businesses are getting wiped out and unemployment goes through the roof, which is, we're due. We're due for the times ahead. And I think I've touched on everything I have today. If that resonates with you, and if you want help building a portfolio and protecting your wealth and your family through the crazy times ahead, it's going to be a roller coaster ride in the times ahead. Get in touch today if you want help investing and building a long-term sustainable portfolio. Until next time, thanks for watching.